All right, guys, here we are, crunch time. It is Monday before the exam. Several requests to do a little bit of Rome and the Middle Ages. So we're going to pick up Rome right as the first triumvirate is created of Marcus Licinius Crassus, Gnaeus Pompey, and Julius Caesar have become the first triumvirate, or the first rule of three in ancient Rome. Now, a problem with that is when you have three guys with big egos, three guys of equal power, it's going to be difficult for them to coexist. So Marcus Crassus goes back over to Asia Minor, or Turkey, and he gets killed. That leaves Pompey, who, was a, middle class to poor kid, a plebeian, sitting alone in Rome, while Caesar is back trying to conquer France. And Pompey now realizes his chance where he can get access to power. And he goes to the Senate and says, hey, make me a member and I will get rid of Caesar for you. Remember, Caesar is top dog. He is top notch, but as a general, but so is Pompey. Pompey is no weak link himself. He was Caesar, 10, 15 years ago. He's just older. And so Caesar is ordered several times to come back from France to stand trial. And the third time he is asked, he is told to come, but he is not allowed to come with his army. If his army follows him, it will be seen as treason, and not only will the soldiers be punished, but their families as well. So Caesar cannot ask his soldiers to come back with him, but many of them do well, they all do anyway. Caesar has made them famous, he has made them rich, he has made them wealthy. So it's the famous story of Caesar crossing the Rubicon, and the Roman Civil War will start. Caesar gets to Rome and Pompey flees. Caesar says, look, I'm going to be back to deal with you senators once I get Pompey. He chases Pompey to Greece and finally to Egypt, where he finds out that Pompey was killed. And Caesar will stay in Egypt. It's the famous meeting of him and Cleopatra. And 7 years later, he will turn to Rome with his famous phrase, Veni, vidi, vici, I have come, I have seen, I have conquered. And he tells the Senate, look, I know you guys tried to get rid of me. I'm going to let you keep your jobs. You can come to the Senate and all that good stuff, but I am going to tell you what to do. I am in charge of this here operation. And the difference here is that Caesar will be careful never to call himself a king. And he was a guy who truly cared and was passionate about Rome. And so he will start a couple reforms. Number one, a Pisistratus-like set of works projects to beautify Rome. He reorganized the government in the provinces along military lines. He was a military guy, general, colonel, major, captain, lieutenant, sergeant, corporal, private. So he put out his military commanders. They knew Caesar. They knew how he wanted things done. There was chain of command. If it got to Caesar, he would send it right back down the chain of command, the general's authority. Next reform that Caesar makes, he wants to grant citizenship to more people of the empire, to get more friends and to get allies. He wants to raise pay of soldiers to give them a higher social status. And the last thing he does is he starts using the Egyptian calendar, but he adds in a month for himself because he's, Julius Caesar, and you can do those things. Well, the problem is that Caesar's reforms work too well. And Rome begins to revitalize, and the people are awestruck by Caesar. And the senators know they're in trouble, and they start saying, oh my God, Caesar's acting like a king. Oh my God, Caesar's acting like a king. And he never at any time called himself that. But they convince one of his lieutenants, Brutus, that that's the way Caesar was behaving and that he's going to take over. So Caesar, while walking with Brutus on March 15th, the famous Ides of March story, will be killed on the way to the Forum. The precedent set back with the Gracchi brothers, when the Gracchi brothers were assassinated, works for Julius Caesar, and now the great Julius Caesar is dead. So the next big question is, what do we do with the transition of power? And Caesar had chosen his nephew, a young teenager named Octavian, to become the next emperor. Octavian was kind of sickly and he was kind of young, and his mom goes, Octavian, if they killed your uncle who has been in thousands of battles, what are they going to do to you? But Caesar had ordered his army to be as loyal to Octavian as they were to him. So he goes to Rome, and with two of Caesar's trusted aides, Mark Antony and Mark Lepidus, they go after the assassins and kill them all. And they will divide the empire, with Mark Lepidus taking most of North Africa, Octavian taking from Greece over to like Spain, and Mark Antony taking from Greece to Turkey to Egypt. They are called the Second Triumvirate. However, in 31 BC, with a rumored plot to take over his throne, Octavian goes to war against Mark Antony and his uncle's former lover Cleopatra in another civil war which Octavian wins. And while Octavian had been young when he came to the seat of dictator, he was very smart. He was a very brilliant young man. He's grown up. He's now a warrior, and he's smart. And at the age of 32, he's got enormous power. He's complete master of the Mediterranean world, but he's got a big job to do. When he gets back, the Senate name him princeps, or first citizen, or imperator, Augustus, exalted one. And he begins to live worshipped as a god. He will eventually claim to give up power, to give it back to the Senate. But they will be like, no, 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 Augustus, as he is now known, you must stay. He has gotten power, and he now controls it all. The Senate meets, but really it's Augustus who calls the shots. And Augustus wants to end the corruption that plagued Rome. So he institutes the civil service test. Much like China, he wanted men of ability, no matter what your background. And he wants to enjoy the prosperity of the great Roman Empire from Egypt and the Mediterranean and Asia and North Africa. And he wants to build public works projects and the revival of farming and settling veterans to the outlying of the empire, things that make Rome great. And Augustus will found a set of leadership known as Pax Romana, or Roman peace. Will end in 180 BC, a rough 200-year period of peace and prosperity throughout the Roman Empire. This would be known as the Age of Augustus. Augustus was a great patron of the arts. Poets like Virgil, who will write the Aeneid, an epic that will link Roman history with that of ancient Greece, and Horace, who will write odes, kind of poems or ballads to glorify the Augustan order. Augustus would pay for you to write things, but you could only write stuff that would make him look and sound better. You had to write that made Augustus look fantastic. One poet named Ovid wrote on the darker side of Augustus how the Roman patricians were one thing in public and acted another way in private, how they lived contrary to their own values, and so he was exiled. A historian known as Livy wrote the history of Rome from the founding of Rome to Augustus. Problem is, there was no original research involved, but he used models of good and bad behavior to emulate patriotism and devotion to duty. Guys like Horatio at the Gates and Cincinnatus and, the Gracchi brothers and the great tales of Romans trying to make a difference. And Augustus sponsored a building program to beautify Rome and to glorify his reign. And the Roman, while the Greeks were small and simple, the Romans thought they could not equal the Greeks when it came to beauty and simplicity. So their philosophy was the bigger is better. The bigger we can build it, awesome. And it shows our power, using the Roman arch to span rivers and chasms, and a big arch can be built upon by a medium-sized arch, and then a smaller arch, able to cross vast expanses. In Segovia, Spain, there's an aqueduct to this day that drops 1 inch per mile from snow-capped mountains, and it dumps water to the city of Segovia's aquifer right now in 2014 that was built by Julius Caesar. So we're going to build big things. And so I describe Rome this way. During the holidays, you'll pass by like a colonial, white house with black shutters, or a red brick house with black shutters, and they'll have wreaths and candles in the windows. It's pretty and it's simple. That is ancient Greece. When it comes to Rome, Rome would be like Chevy Chase in A Christmas Vacation, or here where we live, the guy here on Old 86 we call Crazy Christmas Light Man, that has stuff all over, no rhyme, reason, or pattern to it. It's just stuck all over, gaudy and big and brilliant, and that was Rome. Bigger is better. And Augustus thought it showed his power. At this time, he begins to use realistic sculpture. So unlike Greece, where everything was idealistic, this had warts and scars, and even that famous statue of Caesar looking kind of smug. You tried to get their personality, the imprint on your face, so you could see the emotion and the characteristics of that individual. Because he was the leader of what he called a restored republic, Augustus could not name a successor. So very brilliantly, unlike many of his contemporaries, Augustus started to bring his replacement. A young man named Trajan came along with him in business meetings. And slowly, as Trajan got older and became more vocal, Augustus began to recede into the background. He was always there. But when his reign ends, in like 14 BC or so, Trajan was so used to running the show, and people were so used to him being there that it was a smooth transition of power. And Trajan will name his son his successor, and the ruler of Rome becomes a hereditary monarch. A short while later, eventually Augustus's line will die out, and we will get the Flavian dynasty. These guys will begin to build a new spectacle in Rome, and the Flavian dynasty will be the guys who will build the Colosseum. But before them, there is a list of emperors, both good and bad. Some of them did good things. There is Caligula, everyone's favorite, who, as his mom murders his father to put him on the throne, he kills off his entire family, and he named his horse a Roman consul and would bring it into governmental meetings and speak to it. And the Romans said, "My God, we can't have a guy talking to his horse," so he's assassinated. Another one of the famous bad emperors of ancient Rome was Nero. Nero was a psychopath. He would cross-dress and go up and beat and mug his own citizens with the Praetorian Guard behind him. He would jump up as a singer or an actor during plays, and he would take the leading role, sounding kind of like Scuttle from A Little Mermaid, rah, 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 rah. And everyone had to clap and cheer and tell him he was doing a good job when he was terrible. And he lit the Christian section of Rome, the growing religion of Islam, of Christianity. He lit the Christian sector of Rome on fire. It was made of wood. It wasn't the brick buildings that many of the people lived in and enjoyed. And so he claimed he was not there, but many people supposedly heard him singing on his balcony. Later on, there'll be some good emperors like Trajan, Hadrian, and Marcus Aurelius, who are seen as the last of the good emperors. Hadrian will try and build a wall around the Roman Empire, like a Great Wall of China, the most famous of which is a section on the border between England and Scotland to this day. And Emperor Trajan saw that the Roman economy built on extraction was running out. There was only so much wealth that could be taken from conquered peoples. So he goes to enlarge the border. And under Trajan, the empire just got too big. It got so big, the balloon popped. He crossed over the Danube River, angering another group of German barbarians who came swooping in to Rome at this time. There was just too much land to defend. And the last good emperor is known as Marcus Aurelius. During this time, it was the Roman policy to, they say, is make the world Rome. Versions of Rome, smaller, 10, 15,000 citizens were built all over the conquered territory. The idea is to spread Roman law and culture. So ruins are seen all over Europe to this day. However, by the 2nd century AD, greed and corruption had reduced the zeal to do good for the community. And emperors had to force people into jobs that the plebeians once fought for control to get. And people just started running out of money. The jobless were kept happy in entertainment at the Circus Maximus or the Colosseum. In order to get money in the hands of people, the government created more, handing it out, thereby causing further inflation. And it's Trajan overextending the empire that really does Rome in. It will not be a quick decline. It will be a long, slow decline, but it is steady and at this point irrevocable. At this time, the Christian church becomes very powerful. The Romans blamed them for a lot of the problems. So Christians are hunted and persecuted. It was a crime to be a Christian in the Roman Empire. And one of the greatest Christian hunters of all time, a guy named Saul or Paul of Tarsus, converts. And he becomes one of the chief spreaders of the word. The guy goes from being a Christian hunter-killer to a Christian convert and proselytizer. The Christian church will organize. And by 200 AD, they've developed a system of elders or presbyters, and they have bishops that are going to oversee the growth of Christian congregations, trying to keep them together. And they claim a thing known as apostolic succession, where they are the succeeders of Jesus's apostles. Rome will become the eventual center of what was known as Roman Catholicism, as Jesus' right-hand man Peter was crucified there, as will Paul. And by 300, with Constantine in 313 adopting Christianity, and later on Christianity by Theodosius is the official religion of the Roman Empire. But it is seen as a destabilizing cause early on. And by the 3rd century AD, there's pressure on Rome from all sides. German barbarians were being flushed. Here's a cause and effect. The Han Dynasty in China had gone on to rub out the Mongols. They will move across Asia, displacing many other barbarian groups, and they are flushed westward, and as they cross over the Danube, they come into Roman territory, and the Romans had built a series of all-weather brick roads, and these waves of German barbarians keep coming after Rome again and again and again. You guys can leave it open. The economy is one problem. There is rampant inflation, and the people are living hand to mouth. There is social problems, as the senatorial class was pretty much wiped out by direct attacks from evil emperors, and there was civil disorder as rebellions were going to break out all around Rome. And so no matter where you go, there are problems. That was in Western Europe. In Eastern Europe, in the city of Byzantium, due to its strategic location and its place on trade routes, the eastern half of the empire was functioning well. And so what happens, many of the rich people and business people will leave Rome and head to Byzantium. That is where Emperor Diocletian will divide the empire. He will cut it in half in 284. Very easy to remember. Diocletian divided the empire in half because he was Diocletian. He was the Roman emperor who ruled from the east, while the Western emperor, there was a subordinate over here. And he will try, you got to go, Ryan? We can shut her off. All right. He will try and revive the Roman Empire by fixing you to your job and setting a fixed limit on prices to stop inflation, and to reviving the power of the army. Shortly after him, Emperor Constantine will make constant again or reconnect the Roman Empire, but he will rule from Byzantium, that he will rename Constantinople, because when you're the emperor, you can do that. However, even after these guys, in a long, steady flow, the Western Empire falls apart, while the East remained vital and flourishing up into the 5th century. In the West, people began to fade into the wilderness to form small, isolated, self-sufficient communities we will know as the Dark Ages of Europe, where you make yourself small. And the idea of Christianity carried them through, where a God will look after your safety. Life on earth is miserable and horrible, but there's the promise of the afterlife. 394, Emperor Theodosius makes it the official religion. Could you stop beeping your horn, bus driver? Whew. That's not annoying whatsoever. The two halves of Europe will grow separately. The East will remain united, where there is a strong union between church and state, where in the West there will be no emperor, and the church will serve as the governing function, as church and state will be fiercely and staunchly protected throughout the Dark Ages. All right, I need to take a